So before we begin, a quick note on this video. This video, like the first, isn't academic research or professional psychology. It's a continuation of my personal exploration and an attempt to wrestle with some bigger questions using philosophy and experience and metaphor. I'll be proposing a different way of looking at nihilism, not as a final stop, but as a meaningful part of something bigger. Some of these ideas are still in their developmental stages and are evolving. If they resonate, great. If not, take what you like, leave the rest. And of course, this isn't therapy or mental health advice. If you're struggling with depression or you're suffering in any way psychologically, it's always best to seek the help of someone qualified. Whew! You just never know where I'm going to come from. So hi, once again, my name is Atlas, and I'm going to be talking to you about some serious stuff. But first, I think it's important to recap what we talked about in the first episode. So if you haven't watched that, there's probably somewhere around here, probably up in the corner or something, you're going to see a little white box. It's going to show you the playlist for this, but I'll also leave a playlist link in the description so that way, you can hit up the first video where I kind of lay some groundwork about everything I'm talking about here. So to recap really quick, I basically talked about the definition of nihilism, and I separated the difference between nihilism as a moment of nihilistic depression versus nihilism as a philosophical way of life. And I gave some examples as to when you would be facing, different periods of nihilism in your life, like after high school, or maybe doing a job that you no longer care about. I then posed the question at the end: would new discovery be possible if you were still wrapped up in previous pursuits? So in this video, we're going to be kind of getting into that. But it's first important that we allow the big boss man of this to come out onto the stage. This guy, his name is Dr. Carl Jung. Now, if you're not familiar with him, Carl Jung is a Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst who studied under Freud, but eventually kind of broke away to develop his own ideas, which ended up being foundational in modern psychology today. Did you notice the little break there? Yeah, that's because I just coughed up a lung. So regardless, on a personal note, I have a lot of admiration for Dr. Jung. He's kind of a role model or like a hero for me, and usually the focus of my personal education. Now, that being said, if you ever would like a video documentary on why I think this guy is the absolute G of psychology, I'd be glad to give that to you and share my thoughts on Dr. Jung and why he's so awesome. And to be honest with you, he's a really interesting historical figure, as he went into places in the human mind that most of us just wouldn't survive. He went far above and beyond what the normal human being could take. And he came back with notes and informed psychology up to today. People follow his theories and stuff in their practice to this day. So I'd be more than glad to do that for you. But getting into how he relates into this video, he described a period called the Dark Sea Journey. He also referenced St. John of the Cross, who referenced a period like this called the Dark Night of the Soul. I know it sounds scary. You're like, I don't want to go on a dark sea journey. That sounds terrible. Dark night in my soul? Brother, I get it, but stick with me. What this period was described as was a point of meaninglessness, where intense questioning and doubt creep in, where you start to fold inwards, and you engage in self-reflection and introspection. During this time, it leads to significant personal growth, and that's the upshot. But you have to confront your inner self, like your inner demons and your inner shadow, and you start letting go of old parts of yourself to make way for something new. Like, does this sound familiar, like to what I was talking about earlier in the other video? Now, this happens not just once in your life, but cyclically. So think of it as a winter period where your inner self kind of goes into like a dormant, restful state, and you begin to do inner work. And when I say rest, I just mean you're not as active. You're in low energy. So strangely, in my recent education travels, these two ideas of nihilism and this dark night of the soul or winter period presented themselves to me simultaneously. And I began to I started to wonder, what if periods of nihilism were actually nothing to fear and even necessary? What if nihilism was the beginning of meaning, or like a mechanism to ignite the spark to search for meaning? Not like this extreme philosophical way of life. I honestly tried to find anyone who's written about this, and I couldn't find anyone. And I asked Gemini and ChatGPT, and they also came up empty, saying that the framing that I'm using, they couldn't find. Like, it brushes along existentialism and forms of nihilism, but taking this psychological approach to it and using Jungian ways of thought, they couldn't find anyone. So if you know of anyone who's written in this way, I would really appreciate you putting something down in the comments so I can do further reading. But saying it like this gives no credit to what I'm getting at here. So allow me to just go into detail. So is nihilism so bad? So I want you to think of an infant in a crib. Now, if there's any parents in the audience, I'm sure they can chime in, and feel free to, that when you're in this state of being like an infant, besides eating, crapping, and crying, you don't have much of a purpose. Purpose and meaning have not really been clearly defined for you. You're simply in a state of existence. But it's only through viewing the passing world around you that you begin to interact from that crib. And it starts to bring value onto things and people. You know, I've got Binky, I've got Blanky, I've got Baba, I've got Mama, and I've got Dad. And they come in and they interact with you from this crib. But outside of this room, you don't really have a scope of existing in a meaningful or purposeful way. So what if we went through similar periods where we're just kind of forced to sit in our meaninglessness and just feel the heaviness, the prison-like structure of depression where nothing really has a point. It hurts. It's difficult. In this stage, I would say that old parts or even whole parts of yourself begin to wash off, and we sort of just are in this void. But it's in a state like this that we would be more open to new ideas and would be more influenced by new trains of thought. It's only when we're sitting in it and we're struggling with meaninglessness that we begin to put value on meaning itself. It's only when you stare into the void of meaninglessness that you kind of question it. So when you contemplate meaning, it's at the exact same point that meaning gains a value, and you suddenly start to measure it. So maybe this happens in stages. So you're in the cradle, you're into the void, you're looking out into the nothingness, the singularity room that you're in. In this stage, you're kind of left to sit in the meaninglessness. You're in the void, You're in this haunting absence of meaning. It can be painful, not always, but it can be very painful in here. Old ideas and values sort of go into low energy and start to die off. It's deafeningly silent in here. And it can even be crushing for some people. You feel removed, you feel trapped. Like an infant in a cradle or a crib, forced to stay only in one spot and watch life pass by. You're in the darkest night. The darkest period of that night in your soul. A resting winter period. And you know what? To be honest with you, this part can be pretty dangerous. You can get stuck in this period. I don't really know how to tell people how to get out of this period. As far as I can tell, it would happen naturally, where you would begin to question what meaning is. But you can definitely get stuck in a chronic depression in being in a meaningless place like this, feeling imprisoned in meaninglessness. But if you start to question it, you start to question what is meaning, you would then begin to enter phase 2. So in stage 2, I would call this the calling. It's like your struggle that ends up in free fall. Your ideas are no longer holding you up, and they're starting to rot all around you. And you could liken this period to like spring. Now, a lot of people liken spring, all the flowers are out, and they're just so happy that winter's over. But I think a lot of people misinterpret that spring is often a highly chaotic period in nature. A lot of water's flowing everywhere, a lot of things are washing away, but a lot of the old rot that was stuck under the winter is finally like reinvigorating the soil for potential new growth, but at the same time is still rotting away all around you. So this springtime would definitely be marked by a more painful and chaotic period in your life. And it's painful because you're becoming aware of the lack of meaning. This stage is like an infant crying out to see if anyone's there, and parents once again back me up. When you leave the room, children often have a hard time with permanence, but they call out to see what's there. And in your position, while struggling with nihilism and meaning, you'd be doing the same thing, screaming out into the void to see what's there. Now, the question itself is what defines this stage, as you begin to ask, so what is meaningful then, if I have nothing? You do that folding inwards. You begin to introspect. And this is going to feel very emotional. It's going to be inner turmoil. As you question and doubt everything, your old ideas are rotting away and preparing for new growth. You get stuck in this stage as well, though, like a lot of people do. And this is where my criticism of nihilism as a belief structure comes in, where Dr. Jung talked about like over-identifying with things. I believe in this stage, it is quite possible that you see the meaninglessness. You're stuck looking at the void. You're looking at everything rotting. You're asking what's the point. And so it's not hard to imagine that you would then conclude there is no point. Everything is meaningless. Everything we've constructed, the morals and values we've constructed up till now, pointless. But in my opinion, and no disrespect to anybody who believes in the ideas of nihilism, I just don't feel like that's what it's supposed to be. I feel like the nihilism, the void, is supposed to be a temporary thing. It's cleaning up. It's cleaning up all the old things in your life. It's wiping the slate clean. But you may also fail to find new meaning in this stage. Or maybe new growth isn't developing as fast as you want. It could also be that you get misled by ideas that aren't that healthy for you. You can also get stuck in looping ideas that don't really bring you anywhere, and you can tire out and recede back to the winter. You may also just become resentful. You feel like you did nothing to deserve this. I put all this time and effort to learn and become qualified in what I was doing, and now I'm surrounded by this chaos and this rot, and everything that I believed in is washing away. You're struggling with your belief structures that you worked so hard on disintegrating. Like leaves that have been left from the winter, they're just rotting back into the soil. This stage is really difficult. And in my opinion, it's a good idea to have people to talk to for support as you go through a really chaotic period. But you then, if you can exit this stage, begin to go to what I would call the emergence. You thought it was going to be summer, didn't you? Well, joke's on you. It's not summer. The emergence is the stage I would call where meaning is redefined. Now, in this stage, you are highly responsive to new ideas. Everything in the past has rotted away. The things that you no longer need have been burned off and washed off. And you're in this, you naturally come into a state where you're highly open. I would say this is where your openness to things reaches their peak. Or maybe you differentiate from that and you started building your own values. You started building your own meaning. If this is the case, your struggle with meaning is proving fruitful. You're now like filling that void with meaning as you reorient with new direction and purpose. It's no longer this empty void. You're filling it with things that matter to you. Or maybe you're filling it with things that didn't matter to you before, but you've rediscovered them. And you now find new value in them. This can be a time of high creativity for you. And I don't just mean artistically, it can be constructively as well. Maybe you find a new field that you're like, you know what? I've got a job in this field and I'm going to change the industry. Or I've got a new community, or I've come up with an idea for a new community and I'm going to build. And I'm going to help people. Or maybe now you've taken this opportunity to be highly creative and artistic and engage in music and other forms of art. But dangers lurk here as well, and you need to be really careful of the dangers that can come from this. And the danger is how open you are to new ideas. You are extremely open to ideas and therefore can be misled into ideas that aren't that healthy for you. You need to be careful to properly vet the ideas that you're looking into, because given the high degree of openness that you're going through, everything's going to seem kind of sparkly compared to the backdrop. But you may also mistaken this as the end. Oh, I'm out of the winter. I'm out of the spring. It's summertime. Yay. I did it. I win. But never forget that this is cyclical. Winter will come again, whether in large scale or small scale. There will be times of winter in your life, but the reason I'm kind of laying out these stages is you'll eventually come into the fall, your ideas get old, It's beautiful during that time. Fall actually is like my favorite season. It's absolutely beautiful during that time where your ideas reach their full maturity. But the winter will come. But I guess I'm laying this out to tell you not to be afraid. Maybe this is something natural for us to go through. Maybe you get to build upon these ideas and see them die so you can look into the void and then proceed to build something new again, where suddenly you get to be creative. There's only so much space in your head, and if you don't get rid of old ideas, you can't make way for new ones. So in this context, then, I would start to argue that then nihilism would be a catalyst for meaning. Now, it's a haunting absence of meaning, making you eventually aware, often painfully, that you lack valued meaning. But that's when you start to search it out, even subconsciously. You lack meaning in nihilism, and that's what it takes for you to value it. It's only when you face the void that you try to fill it. Now, maybe existentialists will argue that, well, that's because nihilism inevitably leads to existentialism. Now, if you don't know what existentialism is, it's the philosophical idea of individual existence, freedom and choice, where you begin to decide what is meaningful and valued for yourself instead of society or religion doing that for you, as according to the dictionary. To be honest with you, like, deciding what's meaningful and valuable for yourself through individual existence, freedom, and choice, like America. Like, that just sounds so American, those ideas, doesn't it? It's just like kind of like a side thought. Regardless, if you argue then that nihilism always leads to existentialism, I would then argue that you can't have any form of existentialism without first encountering nihilism. That nihilism still proves as a mechanism, a catalyst for meaning. I do feel like it's fair to point out, though, that my research in existentialism is pretty non-existent. I understand it as a basic definition, but I have not begun to really dig into existentialism yet, so please forgive me for my lack of knowledge in this area. I am going to obviously add more to this series when I encounter existentialism. Regardless, I'll then begin to repose the question, what if we started accepting moments of nihilism and those dark periods in our soul, in our life, and we took those opportunities to gain insight into ourselves and the world around us? Think about it. If you start to question what's meaningful, especially with established, institutions and religions that tell you what's meaningful, but you begin to question it because now you're seeing it fail in front of you, or maybe you're just getting over it or getting past it, or you're tired of it, or there's some kind of struggle going on with you, however it's personal and individual for you, like you would then challenge what's meaningful around you. Well, then how would this affect society as a whole? What would be the impact if we started to all question what's meaningful? What is meaning? So this is where I'm going to end on that question for this video. But in the next video, we'll be getting into more of Dr. Jung, as he talks about the collective unconscious. Feel free to look that up yourself, and I'll be getting more into what that is, and then summing up my entire theory on nihilism and what it actually is. So I really appreciate you watching, and I look forward to reading your comments on this video and reading your criticisms. As always, please be respectful in the comment dumpster fire down below. We're not here to disparage anybody's ideas or what they're going through. And none of this is like any form of doctrine. These are my personal, thoughts and natural progression as I go through these ideas. So, none of this is like established or anything like that. It's just what I think. So please keep that in mind when you're giving your criticism, but at the same time, I'd very much like to hear it, because then I can continue to work on this idea to make it better and better. So thanks again for watching. Bye.